These young women went missing between July of 2007 and September of 2010. For the next 13 years, their cases went unsolved. Until today.
Rex Heuermann.
Rex Heuermann.
Rex Heuermann. Rex Heuermann.
Rex Heuermann
is now in custody.
911 system.
These people are trying to kill me.
Do you need the police?
For more than a decade, women went missing, and their bodies were later scattered along a stretch of sand like trash on a highway shoulder.
They locked up the district attorney because they were mad because he was exposing the truth and taking the credit from him. So that's the type of stuff we see on all levels, unfortunately, in law enforcement.
She calls 911. For 23 minutes, she's repeating, "They're trying to kill me. Please help me."
When killers are allowed to go free, everybody's in danger, and that's what people don't understand.
And it's just not about murder. It's about who society protects and who society pretends not to see.
Hill of Justice is sponsored and produced by Jermaine Delmas Studios.
In Long Island, for more than a decade, women went missing, and their bodies were later scattered along a stretch of sand like trash on a highway shoulder. And while mothers were begging police to just listen, the man investigators now say was responsible was living a life of comfort. He was a homeowner, a father, and was an architect. We're looking at the case of the Gilgo Beach murders, and it's just not about murder. It's about who society protects and who society pretends not to see. And with that case, we are seeing what a system decides, that some lives matter less than others. So, brother, we have a situation where on May 1st, 2010, Shannon Gilbert, she's 24 years old. She's working as an escort connected through Craigslist. You familiar with Craigslist? Yeah, so we got Craigslist, and she went on a call to a gated community in Oak Beach. So around 4:51 in the morning, she calls 911, and she's terrified. And for about 23 minutes, that's how long this call lasted. For 23 minutes, she's repeating, "They're trying to kill me. Please help me." She fled the house where she was at, and she ran through the neighborhood. She was banging on doors, and she hid, and then completely vanished. The police response to this was they thought it may be a mental breakdown. They did not consider her to be in danger in any way. So they didn't even launch an urgent search for her. But to her family's credit, they kept pushing. So months later, police finally organized a search in the marshland areas over there, in the oceanfront, near where she disappeared to. When they began searching through the brush on Ocean Parkway, and that's on December 2010, yes. And it runs along Gilgo Beach there, and it's right there by Oak Beach. Instead of finding Shannon, they found human remains, then some more and more and more. And in the span of days, they find 3 bodies. Kind of rings a bell what we were talking about on Sunday with the Atlanta child murders. And all were women, all were sex workers who advertised on Craigslist. So the local police, they realized that they may be dealing with a serial killer at this time. But instead of calling in the FBI, Suffolk County Police Chief, his name was James Burke, he makes a shocking decision. He shuts them out. This would cripple the case for years. And can you imagine over what? He wants credit.
What? Over what?
Credit. He
Right,
wants his
'cause he wanted the
department.
credit. He
Right.
wanted the credit. Right.
Right. Have you seen that?
But yeah, I've seen that a lot in my time.
Right. And it's even worse than that. So if you're wondering what happened to that girl, Shannon, her body was discovered. It was 18 months later. And they found more victims along that Ocean Parkway. And but the police didn't label her finding as a homicide. They believed that she died of exposure. However, there's other reports that said that her hyoid bone was broken, thus she may have been strangled. But that's where we're at, where you don't even introduce organizations or agencies that can help you solve this. And there's good reason why he may not have. But you said you've been through things like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of interesting characters that become prosecutors, that become law enforcement heads. And to be quite honest with you, a lot of them are looking for this big case where they can become famous. They want some type of John Gotti, OJ case that they can put a feather under their hat, get on TV, write a book or something like that. And the sad part about it is a lot of these characters do very shoddy police work a lot of times, or a lot of them are willing to manufacture evidence and do whatever just to get a suspect, a conviction or something. And they really, a lot of times, don't care about the truth. And it's sad to say, but we've seen a lot of cases like that. And there's a case like that, I believe it's still on Netflix, where a guy just started pleading, taking credit for killings he didn't do. And the sheriff was so enthralled with it, and the guy would take him, the guy would go with the sheriff places, and the sheriff just loved being on TV. And it turns out that this guy really didn't do those killings. And so it's just an interesting look into the mentality of the sheriff that was handling that investigation, because he was just happy to be on TV and take credit for murders this guy didn't even do. And then when a district attorney looked into it and said, hey, these stories aren't matching up, guess what they did? They locked up the district attorney because they were mad because he was exposing the truth and taking the credit from him. So that's the type of stuff we see on all levels, unfortunately, in law enforcement, from prosecutors, judges, and unfortunately, law enforcement heads.
Right. So you cut out the FBI. So you lose access to behavioral analysis. You lose access to databases and basically every type of nationwide linkage tool that you can have. And guess what else you lose out on? Accountability. Because you got that problem too, right? So what happened in Suffolk County was it really spawned off this turf war. And you want to talk about gang members having all types of wars. Guess what? We as police, we have wars too. And it started off.
I know about it. Trust me.
Right.
I've been the victim of it. Yeah.
Right. And everybody gets hurt. Everybody gets crushed, especially when pride gets involved with this. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, it was just a vicious turf war. Everybody wanted credit. No one wanted oversight. And this case could have been solved, brother. And I'll tell you how. While these agencies were fighting over control, there was evidence that sat untouched, leads that went completely cold, and all these families were waiting for answers. But there may have been a telltale here, because in 2015, Chief Burke was arrested for beating a suspect and covering it up. The department was exposed for its corruption and obstruction at the time. So it might tell you everything you need to know about a department that's hiding its own crimes because they can't solve nobody else's crimes. And this was part of the issue.
Exactly. And we see it a lot. I mean, in my county, we continue to see it. We see situations being covered up by the DA, the county police, stuff that's just being shed a light on. And I mean, a lot of people don't realize how frequent this type of stuff goes on. As they say, the fish rots from the head down. And unfortunately, we have some rotten heads in a few law enforcement agencies, probably more than a few at this point.
Right. So you're looking at that when you're looking at these agencies, when they fail to cooperate, guess what happens? Killers get time. They get time to strategize. They get time to do it over again. And the only people that loses time are the victims or
Absolutely.
or the people who survive them that don't get the justice that they could have gotten. Because, sadly, life goes on. People lose their lives and they go to their grave not knowing, at least in this world, that their loved ones could have had some type of modicum of some type of justice. And we got this issue.
And not only that, not only does that happen, but because of that type of incompetence that's fueled by greed, attention getting, or whatsoever, it gives these killers chance to continue killing. I mean, it's like we got a situation in my county where, because of that type of action and because of people covering things up, we had kids that continue to get molested for over a year when it could have been put a stop to if somebody would have just done something. So you create a situation where more people get victimized because of that type of incompetence.
Even from that area, Oak Beach and so on and so forth, these were women that weren't socialites at all. They weren't even from powerful families. It's eerily symptomatic of what we talked about on Sunday, this victim bias that, they were street workers, they were sex workers, and we're going to just be dismissive of them, much like we were of the Atlanta child murders. We're saying, hey, guess what? And, they were black, they're probably runaways, they'll come back at some other time. Not in this case.
And not only do we see that where there's a value put on human life, but I can remember when I was in homicide, if it was a drug related killing, I've actually heard detectives and supervisors say this, where they're just a bunch of drug dealers killing each other anyway. That's just one more off the street. We're not going to worry about it. I've literally heard this. So the time and effort put into it is not the same as if it was some victim that they figure mattered. Well, who they figure, well, this is just an innocent whatever. I think what a lot of times that these people don't understand is this. Uh, all human lives have value. And if you don't stop them from killing the lives of people, whether they're criminals or not, they're going to continue to kill. And I think that's where they miss the ball at. Okay, if it's two drug dealers having a shootout, okay, fine, you're right. They're two criminals. But if you don't put the effort and time into getting the person that killed the other drug dealer off, he's going to kill other drug dealers and get away with it impunity. And you don't know how these shootouts can turn out. We've had shootouts where they're shooting at each other and then a bullet misses and hit a 5-year-old child or hit somebody's grandmother. So every murder should be worth the same. It should be a whole lot of effort. But if the person is not high profile, not well connected, I have seen where the same amount of effort put into that is not necessarily put in anything else. I've seen a murder where leads were followed for one day and no one ever did anything else on it again.
Yeah. I mean, well said. I mean, I'm taking a look at some of the profiles of these women. Some of these women were doing sex work to just survive. They were like single mothers, daughters, sisters. And, that matters, right? We're talking about people. And
And who's to say that they wouldn't change their life around one day?
that's
We'll
it.
never know. Right.
Right. We'll never know. And so, you know, because here it goes. They went missing and the police treated them as, a missing persons, quasi missing persons, saying that they're old enough. Oh, they'll come back, because that's the industry, right? And they're seeing, they're taking a look at them more like choices than people. I think that that's the best way to characterize that. And you hear how the officers talk to the families. One of the officers literally said, well, what your daughter did for a living, what is that supposed to mean? Like to insinuate that because what she's doing for a living, that gives it plausibility for this stuff to happen to her?
It's that type of apathy why things like this is allowed to go on. First of all, one thing I think that law enforcement have to change the culture of is missing persons. This thing that went on for years. Okay, well, someone's missing. Well, give it 24 hours. Well, if you give it 24 hours, a lot can happen in 24 hours. And who knows? Maybe the person was alive and some effort was found to find them, and maybe it would have prevented them from being killed. There was a lot of situations. When I took over sheriff in our county, we got a unique, wasteful waste of taxpayers' money, but we have a sheriff's office and a county police. And a lot of times I would get called, there'd be a missing 16-year-old, 15-year-old, and the police would, they're coming back, or we need to give it more time. Then I would get called, and I have to send 5 or 6 deputies out to start looking to see where this person is at. If a homicide has to be worked in the first 48 hours because you miss important clues, what do you think a missing person is? If that person is reported missing, and you take this 24 or 48 hours, I don't know what dummy came up about that, before you even start looking for the person, you're going to have the same disadvantage as if you don't follow up the homicide on the first 48 hours. So, by doing that, we started taking that stuff serious. That hasn't been done lately, and I've noticed that the amount of missing people have increased, because you're always seeing all these people on the police webpage in my county as another missing person, missing person. But there's nothing to say that anyone's actively looking for them. They just, okay, hey, this person's missing. If you see him, let us know. But is there someone actively looking for them? No. And, that's what people expect. They expect when they report that their child is missing or their brother or sister is missing, that someone's actively looking, and usually they're not. The only time you'll see that type of effort is someone says, okay, hey, a 3-year-old's missing. Well, then everybody will come out and start looking. But if a 30-year-old's missing, well, we're not going to look. And that's a mistake.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought that up, because families were forced to become investigators. They tracked cell phones, data, they called hotels, they posted missing flyers on their own. And at one point in time, the media called it the Craigslist murders, as if it was the platform that was needed to be looked at instead of the women. I think that was completely out of order. But that was what the media did.
Yeah. First you already have, and when you have serial killers, and let's say serial killers decide that they're going to kill prostitutes. We had a guy that was killing homeless people at one time. But the sad part is, it's not just that serial killer depreciating certain members of society's lives, but they feel comfortable doing it because they know that law enforcement or the government doesn't think highly of those particular people as well, and not going to put that amount of effort into it. And sometimes that could be the motive for them picking on that particular class of people, if there's a such thing as a class of people.
Mhm.
But, the sad part about that is, what can get dangerous is the police take this attitude, well, he's just killing prostitutes, you shouldn't be out there prostituting anyway. Well, suppose he perceives someone to be a prostitute who's not a prostitute.
Mhm.
Okay, are we now going to put the effort into it? Anytime there's a murder, the same amount of effort needs to be put into it. But we live in a society that's very media driven. When I realized how devalued a lot of people's lives are, would be around the OJ trial. Right around the time that OJ was going to trials, when I first went to homicide. And I was in training. I was riding with a detective, and he was telling me, hey, I got a murder trial this week. This will be good training, so you can come and hear me testify. So we're on our way to the courthouse, and I noticed there wasn't a lot of people at the courthouse. And you gotta understand, the OJ trial was going on at this time. So,
Mhm.
we're seeing all the press and everything there. And I'm not saying I was expecting it to be that crowded, but I was expecting something. Jerome, when I tell you this, when we went in that courtroom, it was a murder trial. The only people in that courtroom was the judge, the person that was on trial for murder, the prosecutors, 2 of them, his defense attorney, and us. I saw one person sitting in the audience, and that person left. I don't know who they were. I don't know if they were actually knew the victim, or they were just a spectator employee. Literally, the only people in that murder trial was the judge, the prosecutors, the defense attorney, the suspect, and the detective, and I. And I remember thinking, a person's lost their life. This person on trial for murder. And it appeared that nobody cared. I didn't even see family members in there. And you'd be surprised how much that goes on. Well, the media wasn't interested in it because I guess the victim in that case was and I'm not agreeing with this, a nobody, and nobody is a nobody, but that's how they see it. But you get a celebrity suspected of killing someone, and the whole world is watching.
Right.
And that's the world we live in.
It is, and it's the same story, and we got to get together in law enforcement. We've seen when victims are marginalized and these cases are deprioritized, if you will. It's happened in so many different, serial murders. We could take a look at the Green River Killer and how that happened. We could look at Atlanta with the child murders, and
Right.
now it's happened here. And it is just ridiculous. And they had the evidence all along, Keith. In 2010, a witness spotted a dark Chevy Avalanche truck. A tall, heavyset man arguing with one of the women who let her go missing. They had that evidence. The dude is 6'4", damn near 280 pounds. You can't miss him. And that detail sat in the file. It was ignored for more than a decade. They could have cross-referenced that with DMV. So basically, a new task force, after the chief was arrested and so on and so forth, they gathered a new task force and reopened the case in 2022. They revisited that lead and traced it straight to Rex Heuermann. He was the guy who was arrested for all of this, the architect. And right here, they had it right there.
Yes. Yes. Again, none of this is uncommon. Part of the problem we got is a lot of people or places, agency heads that don't have real law enforcement experience. So let me tell you what I mean by that. Maybe they were on the police force, but maybe the only thing they did was work in community affairs, or the only thing they worked was a particular a traffic division, and then somehow through politics they become in charge. So they've never had any real investigative experience. They never worked murders. They never was involved in coordinating manhunts and stuff like that. So now they're in charge of the agency. So they really they it's not that they can't make the horse drink. They don't even know how to lead the horse to the water. And there has to be a person in charge who understands what's going on, and they have to lead that horse to the water. And they can't just sit there. They got to pry his mouth open and force feed the water, or get an IV to make sure things get done. Because a lot of folks that have these jobs are lazy. They'll take 2-hour lunch breaks. They'll ride around all day, but they're not going to do the actual work. It'll have to be someone, okay, where we're at today, where are the leads? Okay, what did you do? What did you do? Did you check this? Did you check this? And that has to happen daily to make absolutely sure that no stone is being left unturned. There's a lot of cases where if I didn't do that, some of these people wouldn't be caught today. I can remember talking to a commander on a Friday. Every day he had to brief me on what he was doing to find a particular murder suspect. And when Friday came, he told me everything that he did. I said, okay, what's next? He said, well, Monday, we're going to, and I'm like, Monday? You going to give a killer a weekend off? And there was a moment of silence on the phone. He said, well, I guess we're coming in tomorrow. I was like, I guess so. If that was your sister, your brother, your mother, would you want the people responsible for hiding this person to just take the weekend off and give him the weekend off? We don't stay on this till we catch the person. No days after they get caught. Well, guess what? He got caught. But if I allow them to take this lackadaisical weekends and holiday attitude, well, that's what you get. And that's another problem you see in law enforcement too. The majority of law enforcement, and a lot of this comes from leadership, they believe they should be working bankers hours. So for some reason, they believe homicides can only be solved 9 to 5, narcotics can only be fought 9 to 5, and that the weekends and holidays will get back to it later. Well, I got news for you. People sell drugs and people kill people on nights and holidays and weekends. So if we don't have people out there to deal with it, we're not giving the public the full protection that they deserve.
Right. Once the task force reviewed the cell phone records and the DNA, They were and this guy had a ton of burner phones, by the way. He wasn't a dummy. Let's put it that way. Within 6 weeks, they connected him to all the multiple murders. And it wasn't like the evidence wasn't there. It just wasn't looked at, And so we have, and you know this, evidence doesn't solve cases. People do. And when you
Absolutely.
have it right there, and when you have people stop looking, guess what? Justice stops moving too. I mean, just makes sense, right? So
Yeah, I agree. I think the problem is we've gotten away from the shoe leather police work, and that's what solves crimes. You know, a lot of people, they overlook the basics. If you just knock on doors, you'd be surprised how many crimes I've solved just by knocking on doors. I remember my secretary's house got broken into, and I responded over there. And I remember asking her husband, I said, let me ask you a question. What house in this neighborhood are people not working, cutting school, or whatever? And I'll never forget, he told me, he said, well, hell, you can go next door for that. And I was like, really? I went next door and knocked on the door. The guy opens the door. I explained to him, who I am. That's my secretary. And I said, our house was broken into. You see anything? He said, no, I haven't seen anything. You mind if we look in the house and see if her stuff is in there? And he said, no, her stuff is not in there. I said, okay, I got you. You mind if we look and make sure? And he said again, no, her stuff isn't in there. I said, yeah, but do you mind if we look? Well, it's not my house. Well, whose house is it? It's Jeremy's house. Okay, well, where's Jeremy? Get him on the phone. Jeremy, you mind if we look? He said, yeah, go look. All of my secretary's stuff was in that house. When I knocked on that door, the guy that answered, that was the person that broke in the house. And we locked him up there on the spot. Just by going and knocking on a door. Next door, we solve a crime. Most of these serial killers, if you just go in a 1 mile radius and knock on every door, somebody knows something that can lead to who's doing those killings.
and
But we've gotten lazy and we get away from the basics. We want everything to be some DNA or some microscopic whatever. If you just stick with the basics, knock on the door, some road checks, some controlling the territory and explaining to folks, nothing here moves until we hear something. Boom,
and
problem solved.
you're right. And that's where we're at here. And after years of silence, families finally got the news that they were hoping for, that they found someone and made an arrest. But for many, unfortunately, the pain will continue to keep on going. Some of the victims are still unidentified. We still have bodies that are still unidentified. We have dismemberment
I agree.
up and down.
Let me say this though. We got an incompetent, corrupt police chief. We got a bunch of idiots that want to take credit, but there's an unsung hero here. Somebody took charge of that investigation. Someone took command and control, and somebody said, "Okay, we're going to go through all this evidence. We're going to figure out what the hell is going on." And they did it. Who that person is someone obviously that don't care about credit, or either no one wants them to get credit, one or the other. But there's an unsung hero. Somebody knows what the hell they're doing and did it. And that person deserves kudos. He needs to know that if nobody's paying attention, we are, and good job.
Yeah, yeah. And it brings me to, one of my points about this, and I've said this in other shows too, that, serial killers, people and murderers, they're brilliant, right? In their own mind, right? But I've always found them that they're not as brilliant as they think they are. But they
Absolutely.
succeed. That's what happens. They
They
succeed.
succeed because of incompetent, lazy cops.
And that's
not
right,
because
because
they're brilliant.
right. And
Right.
it's because of a system that is broken, because we let certain victims disappear without consequence. And this is one of them, where we just let these people, because we just think less of them, and we think so less of them. We have people and we have bodies we still haven't identified. And that's the tragedy of matters just like this.
Right. And that same person who starts out killing prostitutes could well start killing other people. People they perceive to be prostitutes, or people they perceive, whatever they have this fixation on. they could easily put on somebody else. So for someone to think that, well, if you're not a prostitute, you're not in danger. When killers are allowed to go free, everybody's in danger. And that's what people don't understand. Even if you're not a prostitute, even if you're a male, you could be in danger. Why do I say that? You interrupt somebody and they're in the process of a serial killing or whatever. Well, you're a witness now. So in order for them to continue doing what they're doing, to continue having their freedom, they got to kill you because you just witnessed something. So no one's safe when these people are out. For someone to think, well, no, they're just killing homeless people, they're just killing prostitutes. That's very narrow thinking. No one's safe when those people are around. And you have to put such pressure that they can't operate. You have to.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got to be able to put the fear of God in them.
So he gets to, for all these years, he roamed this earth and he took other victims because we happened to go ahead and try to do a measuring contest of, of power. And maybe in a small way, we don't want other agencies snooping around, an agency that had some corruption in it. And people lost their lives. And this is where we're at the end.
And it's insanity when you got people thinking, hey, this is my case. This is my case. Like, who owns a case? What, do you own a dead body so that you're the only person that can look into it? It's real weird. I mean, hey, it's my jurisdiction. No, well, we have jurisdiction too. And you literally got people fighting over a murder scene, over who's in charge or whatever. And like
I'm
you
glad
said,
you brought that up.
yeah,
Because
only
we
people
have
lose the victim.
idiots out there who are amateur investigators that have given us great information to help, but other departments look at them that they're not professionals. Shut up. You got something. Use it, work it.
And a lot of these agencies that don't consider that, no pun intended, they can't find a hook in a whorehouse. No pun intended in this case. But yet they want to take the credit and want to stop anyone that may have something of value that can solve the case.
Yeah. It just, unfortunately, there were other victims because of misconduct. And that's the sad part of this.
And who knows? There may be victims we don't even know about.
And it still may be discovered for sure.
Absolutely.